On a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing? This episode with Dr. Joe Tafur was awesome. This guy he's a kindred spirit. He's the type of person where, is he your uncle? Is he your father? Is he your brother? Is he a fellow astronaut? Lucky for us, this man, I made the decision. We decided, okay, Joe, let's have you on the podcast. We need to make you fit at the meeting of the minds in November with Dr. Gabor Mate, Dr. Dennis McKenna, and a couple others we are yet to name. I wanted to make him fit. I met him through Dr. Dennis McKenna. He is a Soltara alum, and he works with Soltara. And this guy, I just wasn't sure how we were going to make him fit. I wasn't sure. Because I'm not bringing Dr. Gabor Mate here to talk about ayahuasca. I'm not doing it. I'm even making Dr. McKenna flip his script as well. He's going to be talking about psychedelics in the 21st century. Reason being, people who get the calling from ayahuasca, they end up drinking ayahuasca. Whether a goofball came to the Midwest to talk to him about it or not. I have changed my tune over the last couple years when talking about ayahuasca, because I feel that when the time is right, you will find it. I am not facilitating it. I am not bringing it to your front doorstep. I've actually kind of been adamant about ayahuasca mainstream being dangerous. Reason being, when we bring it all the way to the light, Uncle Sam and his clan, they roll in and they want control. That's a dangerous place to be when you're dealing with one of the most powerful medicines this dimension has ever been lucky enough to have in its possession. And we don't possess her. It possesses us. Don't get it twisted. Unfortunately, Uncle Sam and his clan, they don't think like that. These Kentucky ayahuasca shows, Chelsea Handler going down, not doing a diet prior, only doing it, I think, once, maybe twice, and then flying back to Hollywood. That ain't how to do it. You've got to set yourself up, and you've got to be nice to yourself during the process and after. So I'm very hesitant on ayahuasca going mainstream, even though it kind of is right now. And I do enjoy hearing people talk about it, people who have had experiences. I get a kick out of it because no experience is the same. You'll never have the same experience twice. You might work on the same issue multiple nights, but there are different nooks and crannies to our psyche that we don't even know exist, that ayahuasca takes us to and allows us to work on it, bring it to the surface, release the baggage. Dr. Joe Tafur tells some awesome stories, incredible stories in this podcast. He got thrown in with the wolves, or what we like to call the leeches. He got thrown in early on in his ayahuasca practice. And he shares that with us. What you'll notice with my guests, it's all fine and dandy to talk about ayahuasca, but what you realize early on is there's no putting into words the experience. You can try, but none of it is going to fully resonate with another human being that we talk to about it, because it's impossible for our experiences in the geometrical wormhole. There's no way to put it into words. We can talk about like things like one time I was constipated for an entire week, and the jokester side of ayahuasca talked me into sticking my finger up my butt and laughed at me while I was doing it. Just owned me. Or a couple episodes ago, the story Hamilton Souther talked about, like this person who was having gut issues for a long time ended up dropping the largest deuce known to man on the plank walk to the bathroom. Didn't quite make it there. Stories like that. Or my first year, I got butt ass naked in the Maloka in the ceremony hall. Why is that? The jokester spirit talked me into dropping trow, screaming I'm free to the entire room. Things like that. Now, the internal experience is what I'm talking about, not being able to put into words. It's just, and when you don't focus on that, like, oh, I need to go write this down, or I need to go tell people about this experience. When you release that part of our ego that just wants to go preach to the world because we're the most human being walking on it, when you shed that during the experience and you're focused on your breath, you notice that God comes through in between the breaths during the ultimate still. When our lungs have fully released and we're just there. And then the space moves in around you and gives you this ethereal hug. That is what life is. The hug from the ether letting us know everything is okay. So with that being said, thank you so much to Joe Tafur. Thank you so much to Soltara for facilitating the medicine for countless people. Thank you. Side note, this is another remote recording, so audio sucks. Bear with it. There was no way for me to get mic check. I'm talking through my iPhone headphones, and Joe's talking through his computer. So bear with us. I'll make sure it sounds as good as possible. Enjoy the show.
I'm gonna be high as a fucking man.
And now, the stationary astronaut.
Let's begin with Spaceship Earth. I need to hear about Chapter 8 in your book because you're wearing the shirt and I'm not just going to skim past it.
All right, Spaceship Earth. Spaceship Earth was the little title that we gave our trip. It was the first time I took a group of people to Iquitos, to Peru and the Amazon. So I had been going. In 2007, I went once, and I think I went twice in 2008, something like that. And I was really becoming very interested in seeing these different people get help. I took one person, a friend of mine. I took just a solo, just like, hey, I think let's see what they can do for you. And he had a big, he had ulcerative colitis and a lot of childhood kind of neglect and abuse and difficult stuff. And he was able to make some progress there. And so then he helped me organize another group, I said, because at the center I was going to is if you bring 10 people, you stay for free. And so I tried to get a group together, and we called them Spaceship Earth. And it was made up of a real interesting cast, including, he calls himself the poster child for this work, because for a long time I was using him all the time, is a family friend of mine named Russ, who was a Vietnam vet. Mm-hmm. So my brother's father-in-law, his name is Miguel. He was an ASU professor and a Chicano studies kind of guy and a border studies guy and education focused professor. who was very interested in like kind of Native American stuff and wanted to go down, and which was really exciting for me to have a family like my brother's father-in-law.
Hmm.
This is one of his best friends is Russ, was a Vietnam vet. And then we had, we had a psychiatrist, we had, some a body worker, a guy who ended up becoming an organic farmer, a couple acupuncturists, and a few other people. So it's a real interesting little hodgepodge group. And that was Spaceship Earth. So that was the first time that I took a big group down there, and Russ had a major healing
Hmm.
at the center with his PTSD. And now I always make the case that Russ, he's got Vietnam PTSD, so that means he was like 40 years deep by the time we took him down there.
Yep.
And he describes going to like group therapy at the VA and seeing these young guys coming out of Iraq and Afghanistan who look across the room at people like him and they're like, oh my God, I'm going to be coming here for the rest of my life. This idea that this kind of thing can't be healed or very little progress can be made. And so Russ had a huge experience, and it was also the first time that I, helped, assisted in ceremony. So that's why it's a significant moment in the book and in the chapter. I talk about that, and it was a huge adventure. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I could say a lot more about it. What do you?
That's very interesting because oftentimes you hear facilitators having issues bringing friends and family members down there, especially larger groups. Have you ever found any hiccups doing so?
That's a whole different kind of thing. I don't know about those. I'm a medical doctor, like
Yeah.
first of all, and so then like I have a lot of experience from that, in dealing with a high responsibility and taking care of people and dealing with a lot of difficult situations. So that's number one. Number two, I think, one of the big differences that gets kind of lost in translation is that, let's say the Shipibo culture that I work with in Peru, indigenous culture of the Amazon, that's working with ayahuasca and a lot of other medicinal plants. In their culture, as opposed to like kind of the American situation where, psychedelics has been kind of traditionally counterculture.
Mhm.
This is something people were doing, getting away from their families. This is something they're not talking to their families about. There's a lot of awkwardness around that, and a lot of like, there's just not the experience in the culture for people to kind of have a comfortable place to talk to their, let's say, their families about. It's changing, but
Mhm.
in traditional ayahuasca culture, it is the most conservative thing. You do it with your grandmother, you do it with
Yeah.
the children present, you do it with the little kids, you do it.
Yeah.
It's a family thing.
Yeah.
The family oriented tradition, period. That's where it comes from. And so it's in our, for us, it's not about people running away from their families. It's about people kind of making peace with their families and whenever possible, making amends.
Whole
And
different ballgame compared to too much wine at Easter in Western civilization, or too much wine or whiskey come because that's our chalice in the Western world. Come
yeah,
holiday season and Christmas, that's where people up here drink alcohol, while down there their festivities involve some psychedelic medicine.
yeah, well, that's Terrence McKenna he was really big into discussing that, making that point of like the alcohol driven culture versus some culture where it's psychedelics or other kinds of mind altering, mood altering substances like alcohol, but instead using these other things. Yeah, because I don't know, my family's Colombian, in America, it's this kind of, you hear this home for the holidays kind of
Mhm.
talk and like, oh God, I got to see my family. And, it's not really the attitude down there. And I think that's about, I don't know, there's a lot of different things that feed into that. But, one of them is time. People don't have enough time here. They're just stressed out. They're overworked, and so they don't have the time just to hang out and get to know with and be and go through things with and share openly with um, their blood relatives. It seems in a lot of cases. And so for me, it was not. It was like a huge support to have Miguel there and Russ actually, because now there's these two kind of elder guys from my life in Phoenix that care about me, and I'm going, I'm taking 10 people down there. Yeah. So yeah, there's a part of me that's worried about what's going to happen, what's going down. And in fact, just the kind of entertaining part of the story is that when we went, a few people came early. And so our group didn't start till Friday, but a few people arrived early at the center, and I got a few days early to try to, get into the whole thing. And I was, I think I said in the book, by this point, I had drank ayahuasca maybe, I don't know, 7 times, maybe 10 times, and pretty overwhelming experiences in my, early stages of the career there. And so there was a Wednesday ceremony that a few people were there for, and they were like, well, we're here already, can't they let us go to the Wednesday even though our group starts on Friday? And they were kind of like, here we are. And so the shamans said, okay, let them go. They can go. So we went on Wednesday, and it turns out that Wednesday was like a dud.
Ooh.
So everyone drank, and ayahuasca, it wasn't very effective. And people drank, and then they drank again. Some people drank a third time, and then I was going out to the bathroom, and I saw the main shaman, and he's leaving. And I said, where are you going, man? Like, there's some friends of mine from the group. And he says, oh, well, they didn't make the ayahuasca right. And, it's like, I'm out. The other shaman, Ricardo, who happens to be the shaman I ended up working with, he's like, he says he feels that he's going to take care of you guys. And, don't worry. Friday, when your group comes, we'll make up for it. And so that was that. And then everybody got over their jitters because they're like, what? They're like, I don't want to come all the way down here for nothing, for dust. So there's all this fear that they had. And oh, God, now they're like, hey, man, come on, let's have it. So then the shamans assured me, don't worry, we're going to make a very strong ayahuasca for you on Friday. And so that, even still to today, I would say that was probably one of the strongest ayahuasca experiences I ever had in my life. And that was my first time leading a group, right? Yeah. And so that's like something I describe in the book is well, and the one way I describe it is that 4 out of 10 people, soiled their pants, just to kind of give you a ballpark of like what was going on in there. And the thing that was really interesting for me personally was that Ricardo, who's the shaman that I work with now, is my teacher. He was in charge of like our group ceremony. Mm-hmm. They had multiple shamans at the center, so we had a private ceremony for the group, and he came in alone. And he came alone, and I said, like, Ricardo, hey, who's helping you? The ceremony tonight. You usually have somebody helping you, and there's another person. Oh, you're going to help me, Joe. I was like, what? I was like, I just got here. I was here 7 months ago. I've drank ayahuasca a handful of times. And, I got a lot of people here. This is a big deal. Oh, don't worry, Joe. You're going to help me. It's fine. So I was like, okay. So then, I end up drinking and have one of the hugest, experiences of my life with ayahuasca, just like totally confused. And then he sings to me to start what was a 1-month diet with coca, mm-hmm. These master plant diets for the training. And that song just like elevated me and just, like I don't know how I put it in the book. It was like just blew. It wasn't like he blew my mind away. It was just like smithereens. There was just not a lot there. And so right after he was done, it was fantastic. It was brilliant. It was incredible. But I really was having a hard time like keeping track of things. Mm-hmm. And he tells me, he's like, okay, Joe, let's begin. And then I said, hey, man, I'm not ready to begin anything. Like, what are you talking about? And he says, no, let's start working on the people. And I said something like, you know what? I don't even know like who they are or why are they here? Like it was that pulled apart my brains. Mm-hmm. And he said, okay, Joe. First he says, concentrate, concentrate. Mm-hmm. Concentrate, which I say like in Spanish means more the connotation of like concentrate, like orange juice. You know what I mean? In other words, gather yourself, collect mm-hmm. yourself, concentrate, not just your mind, but your being, concentrate. And then I'm like, Ricardo, I can't do it. Joe, concentrate, and then he could see I'm still struggling. He says, Joe, I'm going to make this easy for you. You take me to whoever is the most ill, ¿Quién está más grave? Who's most grave? Take me to that person. So then it was just like there was a lot of moaning and groaning and vomiting. There was a whole, symphony of that. It's not always that way, but this ceremony, that kind of ceremony. And Russ, the Vietnam vet, was obviously like there was like a war zone going on around him, and he was just puking and moaning and groaning, and I said, okay, we got to go to Russ. Okay, take me to him, So then he's singing to Russ. I'm just sitting in behind him, just kind of hiding. And Ricardo's doing this. Sometimes he gets into this real like staccato, like machine gun, just dang, 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 just firing away at him. And then I'm just kind of hiding. And this guy, Jared, who's a close friend of mine, I met him there. We came to the group. He was actually having some of the same visions that Russ was having. He was seeing some of the same things Russ was seeing that night. And what they were seeing was these black leeches just like welling up on the surface of Russ's body and just scattering, And the reason it was an issue because Jared saw this stuff coming towards him. He was terrified, like, what the hell's going on? This stuff is breaking loose. And then blue sparks just, just flying as he's like digging away. And then Russ describes something getting pulled out of his stomach. And, it's all in the chapter in the book there, at least described to some degree. This like leech, this black leech with like nails on it, like nailed in and just pulling that stuff out, and doing all that kind of stuff. So Ricardo just goes to work, until eventually Russ settles down, and then it's complete. And then he's like, okay, let's go to the next person. Yeah. So then that was kind of how I got introduced to like that work and trying to be present for that work. And that turned into just a lot more experiences with Ricardo.
You weren't just thrown with the wolves, you were thrown in with the leeches.
Hey, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
As a medical doctor, how do you explain that? How do you even begin to explain that, Joe?
Well, I have a whole book all about it, man. It's called The Fellowship of the River, a medical doctor's exploration of traditional Amazonian plant medicine. And it is about the explanation of how I tie these things together. I just presented these ideas. We had a retreat at Solterra, actually, back to Solterra. Yep. We had a good retreat in Solterra, and a very nice retreat, and it was the psychotherapist retreat. So they're mostly psychologists. There were people there from like the MAPS from Johns Hopkins, psilocybin trial. There's people from UConn, some university professors and people with a lot of experience in psychology and Western medicine and psychedelic psychotherapy, all that kind of stuff. And so I presented like the basic ideas of the book. So the book is a series of stories, it's like this stories is supposed to, and it's designed to be, interesting, hopefully, and just the journey of it. But it ultimately for me, and its heart of hearts is a textbook that's presenting some ideas. And the ideas, like, there's a lot there, but some of the basics, first of all, is that mind-body medicine, mind-body is kind of like I bring up a lot, it's an accepted topic, mind-body. You can say mind-body at a medical conference and, at the Mayo Clinic, etc. And so there's this whole body of research called like psychoneuroimmunology, which is the connection between the brain and the autonomic nervous system in our psychology, into like the way it controls your heart rate and your digestion and your sweating and your puking and your, diarrhea. And then that's also connected to your immune system. And it's also connected to certain elements of your endocrine system, your hormonal system. So it's been expanded to the psychoneuroendocrine immunologic network. So that's this network that is shown to, like in a PTSD situation, that's disturbed. Okay, show how elements of within the brain, for example, the limbic brain, the emotional brain, like the amygdala. You hear a lot about that. And then as we talk about this bigger P&I network, things like the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, that controls your cortisol levels and your fight or flight response. That core element of the stress response system is all part of the P&I network. And this is getting fleshed out and articulated in Western medicine and in all this research going on. in mind-body research. So there's that system, that network that's been identified. And in a thing like PTSD, where you see multiple elements of this system, this network disturbed, they have, psychological disturbances and amygdalas not working right, and their HPA axis, their fight or flight, is overactive. They have increased inflammation related to this problem, and their hormonal levels, like when you look at things like cortisol levels and even adrenaline, it's disturbed. So this is a problem of the entire PNI network. So in the book, I make the case that the mind body, that pair that is kind of people are comfortable with, a lot of other systems of medicine, whether it's Ayurveda or traditional Chinese medicine or even people shamanism, they'll talk about kind of the emotional body. Okay. So I'm saying the emotional body is the PNI network.
Okay.
That's one of my big points that I'm kind of trying to advance to say, hey, look at this. Look at this PNI network I just described. We can actually show that emotional trauma causes disturbance in this network, like in PTSD. Mm-hmm. And you can show that deep emotional healing leads to alleviation of that problem. People's autonomic nervous system starts functioning better again. Mm-hmm. Their inflammatory response normalizes. Mm-hmm. The hormonal stuff can go back once they have a deep emotional healing, whether that's through psychotherapy, or through other means. Mm-hmm. So now we see this emotional body. It starts to fall into place. Like there's this emotional being, the medium through which you sense and experience emotion. Mm-hmm. That's a real thing. And so you could see that the expression of the emotions are through the autonomic nervous system. Mm-hmm. People blush, their stomach rumbles when they see. So the experience, the crying, okay, the laughing. This is all part of that system that's very much tied into the limbic system of the brain and this PNI network. So that's the emotional. But then these other systems are saying.
Okay, we're back. You there?
I'm here.
Okay, cool. So you were talking about is it called the P9 system?
The PNEI network, Psychoneuroendocrine Immunologic Network, right? The psychology connected to the nervous system, connected to the immune system, connected to the endocrine, the hormone system. Yep. So I'm saying that's this emotional body. Mm-hmm. And so that was showing you how it responds to emotional trauma, how it responds to emotional healing. We were talking about that it's really like a real physiologic thing, this emotional biology and this emotional physiology. And so then this pair of mind body and the other systems, they talk about a pair between the emotion and the energy. Mm-hmm. Very common. That the chakra system would be linked to your emotional, experience. That emotional trauma, emotional blockage would alter what is understood to be the chakra system or the acupuncture meridian system in the body. So then this energy situation or this access to the mystical or this access to the mysterious is thought to be through your emotional being. In other words, through your heart is how people sense mystical awareness, okay, beyond what the mind can understand. So that's this link that is just there. And so as people, for them, they struggle with that. But, the way to start the discussion around this emotional biology is that, and this energetic connection is emotional exchange. So first, that two people across the room, that your body is even designed. There's a whole book about this called General Theory of Love that I refer to in my book, which is UCSF psychiatrists talking about this mammalian emotional biology of just tuning into each other's internal worlds through this process of limbic resonance, tuning into eye contact, tuning into facial expression, tuning into tone of voice. And all of a sudden you start sensing what's going on inside that person's emotional world. First of all, like for matters of safety, are they afraid? That your normal instinct as a human, you scan all the emotional expression all around you immediately, and you get a sense of where people are at, what's the mood in the room, to protect yourself and also to be aware and maybe even to connect further. So that part of you is there. And so we influence each other a lot that way. In particular, when you get really at the early stages of life with your early caregivers, you're very open to receive and to tune in and to train and entrain your emotional life around those relationships. And you learn to relate to yourself after relating to them, how you might relate. And so the baby checks with the mom constantly. the face. What is everything okay? And you get soothed or not. So that experience is very real. And so then psychotherapy, for example, like in that book, what they really determine is that the main distinguishing factor of effective psychotherapy wasn't necessarily the technique, but according to them and what some other people have said, it's actually that there's a loving presence to reflect back to the person. So that as I'm tuning into you and we're talking and we're sharing and you tell me about your problems, but I'm able to give you this kind of loving acceptance vibe, that helps you to accept yourself. And if you do it over time and you do it regularly, it really helps, with the right person. And it gives you that safe space to relax, your blockage, and open yourself up and process what wasn't safe to process before, and release and have catharsis and all that kind of stuff. So they've shown, you can show how this psychological exchange between two people where there is no chemical or pharmaceutical or material, it's simply this energy exchange between two people, as we could call it energy exchange. It's like, at what point is it okay to talk about like the way someone else's energy or vibe, affects you, their emotional state, however you want to talk about it. Yeah. But it's a very real, very common sense experience that people over the phone, they would have a physiologic response to the way someone's talking to them without even being in the same vicinity, So the material element, it's purely the emotional content and the so-called energy of the exchange that alters the way their intestines are functioning, for example.
So beyond physical, does change of perception, is that what helps reboot our endocrine system and help limit and negate inflammation in our body?
Well, it's not just the change of perception helps, but it seems like, the change of perception is definitely very interesting to open the mind to other possibilities, because we can get very closed-minded and get stuck in a lot of loops and a lot of rigid thinking. And so that's definitely been associated with this thing in neuroscience, the default mode network, that's getting a lot of attention in psychedelic research and meditation research, that when this thing is, not overly tight, that you see more anxiety, you see more depression, you see more addiction, you see more OCD, you see more of these kind of problems where you're stuck in your own head and you're not able to tune in to how you feel in your body and your senses to the outside world. So it's a nice day, but you don't care. You don't appreciate it. And you're blocked off from maybe something that's wrong, and your body starts breaking down because you're not well integrated. So changing that perception is very important. But once you also open that perception and allow yourself to reorganize your thinking and to new possibilities, and you're more open-minded, optimism is possible, is now to open and release some of this energetic content, this emotional content. So then that's the kind of Shipibo side, and that's what's coming out. That says like, people, they need catharsis. They need to grieve, they need to weep, they need to feel things very deeply, and they need to feel safe enough to do that. And then beyond that, then once we open this emotional portal to the mystical, and we also can talk about things that have entered psychology that do shift things for people, like in the case of Russ in Vietnam and his experience in his own personal life, is forgiveness. Forgiveness is a concept that has kind of bridged the spiritual traditions and psychological traditions. Yeah, right. It's become a psychological concept. You'll talk to your therapist about forgiveness, but really forgiveness has been a topic of spiritual traditions for millennia. It's accepted that this is a soul level thing that needs to happen. In other words, forgiveness might start in the mind, but it is only completed in the heart. That's what makes it real. And again, it's just about humanity and being able to talk about what it's like to be alive and be a human being, and to be honest, as a doctor, and say, that's kind of like what this person needed. They need to forgive themselves. They need to learn to forgive this person. And that is related to some kind of energetic shift, that we can track in their emotional biology. That's where we can see where the rubber hits the road, like when this happens. And so that's the bridge work. And so then that also, just as the psychologist is able to, there's two things that phenomena that I observed that were sort of the Shipibo were considered very common sense. Remember, when somebody is blocked up emotionally, a lot, they have a hard time opening to the mystical. So you see somebody come down to drink ayahuasca with us the first night, nothing, it's very physical, maybe nausea, vomiting, shaking, or maybe not much. Not a lot happens. Shaman says, oh, that guy's blocked. Don't worry. We're going to work on them. We're going to clean them. In 2, 3, 4 ceremonies, they might end up seeing God. And that was like every week that happens. This process where you realize this emotional blockage, this unprocessed trauma, which the society is like, I don't know if you saw the movie From Shock to Awe.
Yeah.
Talk to Awe. One of the vets was like, he just woke up and realized, oh my God, our society is a repository of trauma. In a society that's overly materialistic. And so when the society is very blocked up emotionally and is not dealing with that stuff, in other words, it's very hard to access anything beyond nihilism. It's very hard to feel the subjective fact of what these meditators and these, holy rollers and what everyone's trying to say. Hey, man, this connection exists. You can be part of this. But if you don't have access to that because you have all this unprocessed trauma that's blocking up what is your intuition, that's blocking up what is your creativity, what's blocking up what is your access to the mystical, to your opportunity to feel something that you would consider personally meaningful, and you feel it in your body, that's what makes you feel like, well, this is really a meaningful moment. Oh my God, the hair standing up on the back of my neck, and, spiritually significant. And so that kind of access happens that way. So as we help people unblock and, open their minds, then they start feeling this more of a kind of a spiritual consciousness, or a lot of people describe that. Similarly, you can come out the portal from the other end. So now we're trying to help them with their mind body. We're trying to help their inflammation from their PTSD. We're trying to help their blood pressure from their stress. So one way we could be psychological, and we could just be there with them and help them process and love them, and allow a space for this to happen. Another way, in a more advanced kind of a practice in a particular mystical technique, would be to sing Icaros to the person, to go through a training that's going to help you. And this is just the mystical, but I'm just saying that the possibility exists with the psychology. We can understand how this would happen. That through this loving presence and this energetic connection and support, that you would allow the person now to go through this processing that they haven't been through, And so we see that beyond psychology, we see the MDMA PTSD trial, with MAPS, and this incredible psychiatric revolution as far as the result they're having with people who had treatment-resistant PTSD. And so now we see, how do you explain? Yeah, okay, they have the chemical, and so they're trying to figure out how the chemical works. But the other people were doing the chemical too. They're doing MDMA at the party and at this concert and all that festival, and they're not having that kind of breakthrough that they're having when they use this substance under the care of an advanced practitioner. It gives you that human element to guide the person through it. And so my organization, Modern Spirit, the nonprofit, which is dedicated to demonstrating the value of spiritual healing and modern healthcare, has teamed up with MAPS and USC. And so we have the Modern Spirit Epigenetics Project. So we're saying that this energetic shift, this emotional shift, this change, that you could track it at the epigenetic level. It would make sense that it would happen at the epigenetic level. There's in that book, that's a huge theme of the book, is building that argument. That look at this case of this anxiety, this depression, this addiction, this migraine headache, this Crohn's disease, this chronic cough that's not going away, this unexplained body pain, and a few other cases that I described. And so we're doing it. And so it's called the Modern Spirit Epigenetics Project. We're raising money. We're always trying to raise awareness. modernspirit.org. And so MAPS is allowing us access to the people going through the trial to track their epigenetics, like we say. And so the book ultimately is about the intersection between biology, emotion, and spirituality.
Joe, with memory being stored in our DNA and them kind of finding more and more proof over time with that, with this push you're doing, would you ever recommend people who are considering having families, starting families, going through this process, getting themselves completely healed and then having children so they're not brought into trauma?
Yeah. So then you're talking about like epigenetics, so the idea of stuff being stored in our DNA. And in fact, like this kind of stuff, it would be better said maybe stored on our DNA. Like I talk about it, it's software. It's not hardware.
Okay.
There's the hardware code, right? That is the code that's coming down from like whatever life or death and natural selection. And then there's this software, which is this all the machinery around the genes and over on top of the genes that influence how these genes are expressed. So first, like obvious example of the software is that the red blood cell and the neuron have the same DNA, exactly, right? Just like two twins, but their software is programmed differently. So they say, okay, this one imprinted red blood cell, this one imprinted neuron. Then you
Damn it, hold up.
You all right?
Okay, so are you still there?
I'm here.
Okay, so go back to imprinting on the neuron. That's where we lost you.
Okay, so imprinting on the neuron, I was saying the difference is epigenetic software, okay? In other words, they have the same hardware, DNA. And then if you take Dolly the sheep and you have a mammary gland and you unprogram the software, make a pluripotent stem cell, now you can make a whole new sheep by reprogramming. It's all the same DNA. So there's this versatility in the biological system with this epigenetics, that which lies on top of the genes, that has a huge influence and impact on all of our biology and the way our genes are expressed. The reason it's become real interesting and important is that part of this tracking and this memory that you're talking about is, so then like a simple example that is this mouse example where they take these mice and they stress them, they shock them or whatever every time they smell a smell. They do it until the smell just makes them freak out, right? Now they're just conditioned to the smell. It's bad. That is passed on to several generations of the mouse afterwards.
Isn't that called the 100th monkey theory or something like that?
I don't know if I think the 100th monkey I thought was when there's just finally enough people to do something that makes something happen,
Okay.
like enough monkeys doing podcasts that, there's a cultural shift in the society. You know what I mean?
Well, the point being is after 99 monkeys consistently learn something, it's in the 100th monkey's DNA, and they never needed to learn it. They just know it.
Okay. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was that. But this is like that. But what this is that this is just passed on. Like it's imprinted into their epigenetics on their genes. Sorry, my monkey talk is ridiculous. I was just having fun. The epigenetics thing is imprinted on, right? So now their kids automatically, these mouse babies automatically have a fear of that smell.
Yeah.
Okay? So that would be, in a biological sense, that's like an instinct. That's a form of instinct. So now let's say this mouse moves into a new ecosystem and they start tracking they just start tracking memory, emotional memory of like, this is what makes me afraid. And this is what gratifies me. This smell, there was food over here. This smell was good for me. That gets passed on to their kids. That's the like adaptive version of that. Mm-hmm. That helps inform instinct. So we're learning a whole new thing about one of this biological system that we didn't know. The problem is that emotional trauma also is imprinted sometimes. Mm-hmm. Depending on how much it is or how often it is, or if there's no release from this repository of trauma, it accumulates, and then that can get passed on. Mm-hmm. And now the experience of like somebody in a concentration camp in whatever Poland, they can get passed on to their kids, and now their kids there's research around this idea that their kids are more prone to anxiety disorders, not necessarily because of the parenting. Everyone, the parenting, of course, the family is so affected by this. It wasn't just that. They could show the imprints were there, passed on. And so that's that kind of thing. And so, but you don't have to do ayahuasca or psychedelics. We haven't proven that affects the epigenetics. We're trying to prove that. So we couldn't recommend clear your epigenetics with this stuff. It's an idea that I'm proposing, but also ultimately there's so many ways to do that. Like I said, psychotherapy is showing epigenetic changes. Yeah. So ultimately this epigenetics is part of our system, our biochemical system that responds to very subtle energy, emotional exchange between two people. It responds to meditation. They've shown it responds to altered states of consciousness. It responds to psychotherapy, as we said, and it responds to so many of these, very interesting things that it kind of like looks like this is that part of our biochemistry that responds to subtle energies. That's what I'm saying. Like we could see some of the emotional stuff is going to get tracked here. And so you can look at certain gene regions like the cortisol receptor and the genes around that and show in PTSD how that's disturbed, that you could see that this has overly been imprinted by trauma and it's affecting the way that gene is expressed. So now you can study that region and take somebody through the MDMA trial and show, okay, did we get a shift in the epigenetics? So that's that's the theory. And since it's a self-published book, I can put that stuff out there. Like self-published, I'm sorry. The point was spiritual healing, touches biochemistry, possibly at the epigenetic level. Like that's where some of this stuff would happen.
I think that's why so many people have so much faith in the MDMA trials and them reaching phase 3, because if you've ever even been to a rave, every single time I've taken ecstasy, I have had an aha moment emotionally with someone else.
Right.
And that, I think, is really going to kind of start drawing it out of people as we live in this material world, in the Western world, and it's infiltrating everywhere now. Kids in Africa are addicted to their cell phones now. And we're seeing that. And then we talk about epigenetics, and we can't be so hard on minorities in inner cities who still fear the police. It's in their DNA.
Yeah.
On their DNA, sorry.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. And so that's what we call ancestral trauma, in the spiritual tradition. Ancestral trauma. And so then and the reason it's a big deal is because if we can show this kind of stuff, that the epigenetics can change from this kind of treatment, then you can say, hey, well, we have a hope with this ancestral trauma. If somebody's coming through this line where it's just like, and it's not just African Americans and with slavery history or Native Americans with their history. I mean, you have these very impoverished white communities too that are really struggling, and they're frustrated because no one's giving them the attention they think that they need. And it's just like, what about? So it's everybody. It's a human situation that this is what we're trying to bring back. Is like the argument is that the human being going through this life needs healing. But healing needs to be valued. This is a real thing. We can show how the stress, wear, and tear accumulates in the body, and the epigenetics is one place we can see it. The PNI network disturbances is another place we can see it. And show that this is like what you're seeing is somebody that needs healing. And if they rule out the cancer and you rule out the other disease and you have them checked out by the doctors and everything, and you still don't know what it is, then you should look into this emotional, side of things. And if you're going to do that emotional side of things, then it seems that like a very open-minded and even like a spiritual context may be more effective in helping that person like process that stuff. At the very least, like a psychedelic psychotherapy thing, or, some kind of spiritual context, some loving, in other words, a psychotherapist who's not afraid of love or talking about love. That kind of thing is basically at the level that you need. Mm-hmm. And so it starts pointing to the need for this kind of healing to help people open their hearts and open their minds and show people like, hey, man, when your heart is too closed and your mind is too closed, that's actually like a health problem. Mm-hmm. That's linked to like health consequences. And so it starts to open that discussion around kind of a universal spirituality, really, based on health. Like we're no longer, it's not about this, the morality isn't necessarily based on, I know I'm right and you're wrong. You should, what I believe. And, that's like a very strange, people want to get so angry and hurt somebody over supposedly their belief system. Mm-hmm. That's trauma, that's trauma built up. The healed person, so as I say, spiritual well-being is reflected in emotional health. Yeah. And this is this emotion-energy connection. Yeah. We're trying to link the the systems and the traditions, like you said, how as a medical doctor do you make sense of this? Say, well, I got depressed in medical school, going through that process. I had a real hard time with it. It just seemed very like the whole culture and the whole system. I was just my sensibility. I was like, I don't agree with this, And I said, and I went. That's how I opened the book. Have you ever gone to the doctor for something you thought was wrong and been told everything's, you're normal, everything's okay, nothing's wrong with you. Like, that's nice to hear, but sometimes if something's still wrong and you don't feel well, and just because it doesn't make the x-rays or the labs, something's wrong, and that something wrong can get worse and can turn into something, and you can just have a hard time. In my case, it was like a depression. And so I tried, antidepressants, and which is like, my dad was a psychiatrist, and I tried it a little bit, and it did help me. It helped me, but at that time I was also learning about the psychedelic science renaissance, and seeing there's all this biochemistry in common with the SSRIs, with the Prozac, and things like, they're very related systems completely. Yeah. And so then I saw, wow, this is like everything we're using Prozac for is what they're kind of thing they're investigating psychedelic medicine for. Is that your stationary astronaut sweater?
Right here, yeah.
Okay.
Check it out. Got it on the hat too.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, buddy. So sorry, I have to relieve myself for a second. Don't worry, we're gonna stay on the phone. We're brothers. When I think of perception right now, when I bring it up, the reason I bring it up, I feel like it's kind of a kickstart for people, because I like to break it down metaphorically for people who they might not be lucky enough to have conversations with the Joe Tafurs of the world or the Dr. McKennas, where we have this black goop on our planet right now. And it's this cause for addiction, where people are not just addicted to chemicals, they're addicted to their phone, they're addicted to attention, they are addicted to material things, material goods.
Right.
Now, if we are able to reshape perception and bring people from, say, left field, do you think that's going to have a big impact on overall addiction? Some people are addicted to their belief system, where they're so caught up on their belief system to the point they clash with others who don't vote for Donald Trump.
Right. So then, you got like, you have Gabor Mate, right? And other people talking about addiction.
November 1st, baby. November 1st.
Right.
Meeting of the
locked
mind.
it in. Stationary astronaut. Talking about addiction rooted in emotional trauma, right? That this PNI network I was talking about, this emotional body, this limbic brain is disturbed. And some individuals, either because of ancestral trauma, now we can then bring that into the thing, or from their childhood trauma, when they were going through all this attachment situation and the bonding with their early caregivers in their childhood, and even later in life, serious emotional trauma can push people into addiction. And so he's saying that, when these people are shooting heroin, they're just looking for, it's like a hug. It's like a warm hug to them. They're just everything they didn't get, all the love. It's a mood altering substance. So you don't like the way you feel. And so you look for the thing that changes the way you feel. And so it's, the mood altering substances, in the addiction situation, or you said the phone, the likes, the thing, the material pursuit, the money, it's like, okay, maybe this time, maybe if I sleep with this porn star at the golf tournament, then I'll get over it. Then I'll be able to calm my greed down. I don't know. I just got to do it. It's going to make me feel good. Yeah, it's risky, but oh well, let's drive to feel this. And is that related to like emotional trauma from an alcoholic father as a child and all these difficult things? And is greed, in fact, money addiction, when it gets to this destructive level, like, there's alcohol use and there's alcohol abuse. So is greed, when greed becomes, as I like to call it, greed rot, when it becomes grotten, when you start having problems with your family over it, you start having problems with the law over it, you start having problems with your society. You're interested in contaminating the water supply where your children drink. That is a Groton phenomenon. That is an emotional disease. That is a deep, unprocessed pain and trauma and hurt at the root of that. And so as you start bringing that to the forefront, and that's the point of this whole discussion, is like rather than focus on the morality of it, which people are going to argue and make, get in the belief system, let's focus on the health. Like this is your physical body is going to suffer, if you continue with this, you're going to wear yourself out and hurt yourself. And so how do we address that? And so then it's this deep emotional healing is what allows people access to the mystical, which is what the spiritualists have been saying forever, to where now you can adjust the way you feel a bit through not just because you feel lost and disconnected and, oh my God, and I don't have any connection, I don't feel connection, so I'm going to get drunk and just, now, whoa, I relax and now hey, everybody's kind of cool with me. Everything's pretty cool, versus like getting there through, whatever, spiritual practice, through connection to nature, through living in a loving community where people are going to give you that kind of support. So where now you have enough space to feel into a connection in a sense where you don't need something else to put you into that state of mind and being and really into that open-hearted place where you feel comfortable with yourself and how you feel.
Joe, we're seeing a spike in autoimmune disorders.
Yep.
While I was down in Soltara, I read this book called Clean Gut, and it's all based on our gut flora. And you learn, and as we all should know, that inflammation is the cause of, let's say it, 99% of disease.
Okay.
Now, do you think with this rise in autoimmune disorders, this is more than physical? It's a spiritual lack of connection?
Yes. So why do I say that? Because there's this thing called, there's gut flora, so that's great. Sometimes the gut flora, so it's a good focus. We need to look at that. A lot of people, once they get their gut flora better, okay, they got the probiotics and whatever, they change their diet and then they get better from some autoimmune disease. Some people do all that and they don't.
Yeah.
They do all those changes. They got all the perfect diet. And so I talked about, like, for instance, in the book, there was a psoriasis case. So psoriasis, autoimmune skin disorder, which is known to, flare in people when they're having a lot of stress. Their psoriasis gets worse. And there's a lot of environmental factors. There's allergy stuff. There's genetic stuff. There's all this stuff. But there's this threshold of where it gets worse and a threshold of where it gets better. And so, there's some epigenetic stuff with psoriasis now. They've discovered that, okay, epigenetics plays a role. In the case that we had, when she had a complete resolution of her symptoms after a Vipassana retreat.
Ooh.
So she goes to a Vipassana retreat, it completely resolves, like thick plaques on her shins, and, she has advanced disease. So all of a sudden, this spiritual pathway for her was very important. I talk about in the book this concept of neurogenic inflammation. So this neurogenic inflammation, like you're saying, it's inflammation, but it's not from the outside. It's not from as a result of an injury or to some insult or some chemical. It's your body's generating it. The PNI network is generating this inflammation. And so it's neurogenic. So you can see that in migraine headache. There's neurogenic in psoriasis, in Crohn's disease, this autoimmune disease. You see this neurogenic inflammation. So you could talk about that a lot of different ways. Some people would say that's the body saying no. That's the body crying out. That's the soul saying something is wrong. The system has been overwhelmed, and you might say like overstressed and needs some kind of relief. And what's interesting in the case of the book, for example, in the Crohn's disease case, which, the guy had a really bad diet before he came down to Peru. And so changing his diet and maybe getting some microbiome, some bacteria from Peru and from the jungle probably really helped him, because they say we're overly sterile and, third world people's gut bacteria is better than ours.
Yeah.
So that probably helped him a lot, and we can't discount that. He believes that the shift that he had was related to this incredible emotional healing that he had, which was around sexual abuse as a child, which is around heavy physical abuse from his stepfather, resolving that, coming back into a peaceful relationship. His mom is still with that guy and all that. He had like an incredibly dramatic shift. from a guy who went from 3 surgeries and, chronic pain and abdomen and diarrhea and, all that bloody stools to like nothing, in a period of 3 weeks. And then that lasted, he's come back, but he had minimal symptoms the following year, like almost nothing. And so it was like very much about his emotional pain. And the neurogenic inflammation is one way to describe that. The epigenetic disturbance in his PNI network would be the other way to describe that. So now we need pathways that are going to help shift this epigenetic software, shift the disturbance of the stress wear and tear in their PNI network, and then shift, this neurogenic inflammation, this smoldering illness that sometimes you can handle pure physical material ways, but sometimes you can't. The other case was a idiopathic chronic cough. The lady has a chronic cough. She's gone to all the pulmonologists. She's gone to CAT scans, pulmonary function testing, asthma, allergy, cough, pneumonia. They ruled out everything. And she still has this dry cough that won't go away. And then it turns out when you talk to her, and then again, this is the humanity element that sometimes gets lost within the Western medical training, because we get locked up, just like you said. People's belief systems, because of this emotional energy connection, they're very wrapped up in their emotional life. And so when you push into somebody's belief system, if they have some unresolved, like emotional trauma, they're going to react. They're going to get upset because you're poking around like in the matters of the heart, because this is what I believe and this is how I'm getting through what I have to get through, So I'm, whatever, make America great again and back off. Like it's like there's anger here, like there's, I don't know, even hatred, like, and about my, ideas about the political needs of the society. Like what exactly is going on here, or on the other side, you have some people that it could be overly extreme in their leftist beliefs and hate somebody who's wearing a MAGA hat and, without even thinking about what's this guy, what's his life, and what's this person. And so then in this kind of like in your humanity, and then down there, the beauty of working with the Shipibos, for me, coming out as a medical doctor, they can, all the subjective stuff they want to know. What are you dreaming about? What are you thinking about? Where do you feel this in your body? She's like, you know what? I don't even feel the cough in my lungs. It's coming from my solar plexus. That's where this thing is coming from. The Shipibos are like, oh, okay, no problem. Yeah, obviously you've got a lot of grief and shame. It's blocked up in there. So we're going to help you release that in the ceremony. We're going to do this energetic work. And so that's what happened to this lady. And that's another chapter. But, she comes in, she has this experience, doesn't feel the ayahuasca. I don't really feel it that much, It's like, I don't know. I'll give her a little bit more. Kind of, she's a little wobbly. Bring her over to the shaman, start singing Icaros to her. This really advanced practitioner, this lady's in her 70s, just starts jamming. And sweetly, this lady immediately starts bawling, goes from 0 to 100 in response to the Icaro. Starts weeping her eyes out, then starts coughing, and then the cough, and now it's hacking, and the hacking, and now she's vomiting, now it's all blah. She says afterwards, well, she had this huge experience, and all this stuff opened up for her. And it was a slow path from there. She turns out, she's writing a book about her experience. She, her husband was cheating on her like for 2 decades. She didn't know about it. And her, her childhood, she had kind of a tough go. Her parents were alcoholic. She had to kind of grow up real fast. It was tough on her. When she had the opportunity to fall for this guy and run for it, she did. Maybe she didn't ask too many questions, or, it was very much good enough and much better than where she was at. And she was the dedicated wife. I'm going to do everything right. I'm going to be the right, this is my chance. Yep. He's maybe taking advantage of some blind spots that she seems to have. And then this starts going, and then she's not really picking up on it, but something's wrong, and her body's picking up on it, and something's just not fitting. And she starts coughing. This cough comes. And then she finds out, what's going on. And it turns out he's like had another family going, on top of his other activities, and there was a lot of stuff going on. And so then she started her divorce process and came to us, and then slowly, went, she came back again and this other stuff and, opening, and then, it slowly resolves. You know, idiopathic chronic cough there's one of the medical explanations is neurogenic inflammation. You know, your own body crying out somehow for some reason.
It's so crazy, and unless you've been there and you've seen literal leeches come crawling out of somebody, or my second year, there was this guy named Fergus. This is down at Blue Morpho in the Amazon. He's from Canada, very broken spirit and very pessimistic, but he was still a professional, you know, and this gnome character just got ripped out of him, and it was just grasping for anything he can grab onto to just stay in Fergus, but they got it out of him. Now, were we just seeing things? Of course, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that wasn't a metaphor for what needed to happen.
And the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah.
It's like, just because it's like, guess what? I mean, that's what I like about what you're doing is the humanity of it, you know? And it's like how it's just like the realness of it, that's what people need to hear, you know? And that's I think you're saying, you know, what you're talking about. And not everyone gets to talk to these people, or, you know, and so you're bringing this discussion to the people, you know what I mean, in a way that they can understand and relate to, which is our human side. And so it's like, guess what? This guy feels a lot better. So, you know, that's the first thing, like you were saying, that's what I get a lot. Like, how can you do Amazonian shamanism and be a medical doctor? And, you know, how do you make sense? And doesn't that make you crazy? And I was like, well, you know what I did is I wrote a book. And the point of the book is, like, guess how we explain it? Through the patient. Mm-hmm. It's the only thing that matters, you know, if we're serious, if we're honest. The whole reason people are going down, the whole reason we would invite somebody to go down is because we care about that person. Mm-hmm. We're not going to necessarily, you know, people will put down their whatever, if it's the Trump thing or whatever other thing, you know, they'll put it down if their child is dying and they realize they need to change their paradigm to try to give this person a chance. Mm-hmm. And so then we can just relax that stuff and watch a person go through it. And we can hear what the doctor said about it, and we can hear what the shaman said about it, and we can hear what they said about it and what their experience was. Mm-hmm. And that's what we know, you know. And if we can just say, oh, this doesn't fit in this box, and this doesn't fit in this box, and it doesn't matter, you know. If you care about that person, that's just BS. Yep. You know, that's just blah, blah, blah. And so that's kind of the problem, is that this over kind of, you know, that's what Ralph Metzner, who just passed away. I don't know about Ralph Metzner, but he was a really cool guy. You know, I had a couple opportunities to talk to him, and he would say, you know, science is not medicine. Mm-hmm. Like, science is not medicine. Science informs medicine. Science is a very interesting approach. We learn a lot about the world, but it's not medicine. It's not the study of healing. You know, it's not what you're going to rely on when you have to face grave danger with illness and disease. You are, to a point, but when they do all the science for you and it's not enough, you're going to consider a little bit more, you know, and like you're going to be this idea of like the broken spirit, like you talked about, and the pessimism and just that language, you know, like I talk about, I try to bring it up in the book. It's like talking about being soul sick, you know, and broken spirit. It's like, everybody knows what that is. Yep. You know, everybody knows what that is. The head doctor at the Harvard, at the scientist or whatever, they know what that is. Mm-hmm. And that's what you're bringing, you know, is that honest truth about, like, guess what? Like, yeah, and that's how I open the book. It's like, yeah, I'm a medical doctor, but first I'm a living human being. Yep. Like, I'm not going to deny that because of, like, I didn't learn, you know, everything about being human in school. You know, I learned it from my life. I learned it from my family. I learned it from my friends. You know, I learned it from nature. I learned it from being alive. And so it's the reason that's so important is because it helps us understand why people suffer. Mm-hmm. You know, that it's okay, is it the biochemical? Is it the thing? It's like, it might be, but if we open our minds and we open the discussion, we can find out sometimes it's something totally different. Maybe it's the microbiome. Maybe it's a broken heart, you know, underneath all this. And healing a broken heart is not necessarily like rocket science. Like, this is something people have been doing from day one. You know, and so shamanic techniques and, you know, traditional healing techniques, of course, are focused on addressing that level. because they have all this experience, and they're open to the science. They want to learn about science. That's very interesting to them. But they also know, like Ricardo says, hey, if your problem is at an energetic level, surgery and pills, they're not going to do it.
Yep. And to hammer that point home, science and the Mayo Clinic cured got rid of 90% of my dad's cancer. The depression is what killed him. And my mom hammers that home. Nick, your dad was damn near cured. It was the depression that just took him back to the promised land.
Yeah.
And that shows that science can be one bridge, but it isn't the end all be all. If we're not going to take care of people's mental state, then what good is science?
Well, and psychoneuroimmunology teaches us that this stress and this wear and tear and these things that feed into depression compromise our immune function. And one of the areas that, like in psychoneuroimmunology, that they talk about a lot is like with us, a lot of this depression and stress, two areas, the immune system has these different fronts. You have this part that's fighting whatever, gut bacteria and that kind of stuff. You have a front that fights viruses, you got a front that fights cancer, the natural killer cells and cancer immunity. And like viral and cancer immunity are two areas that you can see there's research showing, it can get compromised in depression. Mm-hmm. And so people get sick more often. They're getting the coughs and colds and, they're all your depressed friends always sick and, sniffling.
True. So freaking true. I've had to cut ties with business partners because they were always sick, missing meetings. But guess what? At the root level, they were always depressed.
Right. So but I'm saying psychoneuroimmunology has articulated that. They've studied this. This is a real thing. You can show how serotonin levels in the brain are related to certain inflammatory markers and their production and all that kind of stuff. So this is we're waiting for everyone to catch up. And that's what I'm trying to, I had a very fortunate experience. I was 2 years in a lab that studied that stuff. And so I got exposed to that. But, so you have that issue. And so if you don't treat the depression in some way, you lose immune function. So in a situation, like cancer, where we can't always solve the problem, and I'm very sorry to hear about your father. And it's such a tough, I got friends going through it right now. And you can't, we can't always fix everything, but it's like we want to give the person the best chance. So we want to optimize their immune function because we know their immune function is part of how they fight cancer. Mm-hmm. And to optimize their immune function, we need their spirit in the best place possible. And that's what this connection thing is talking about. And it's just we know this, right? It's like if it was sports, we could talk about it openly, oh, the guy, you got to get him. You want them to just go unconscious and, be magical up there and do this thing and get into the zone and just let his spirit break loose, And if somebody's, this guy's brokenhearted, because this thing happened and they can't perform. And it's just it's everywhere. But in science and medicine, and I would say that from my experience, in that realm, in the nerdier realms, that we're talking about, and I'm, making my off-color comment, but is there's a lot of brokenheartedness there, there's a lot of brokenheartedness, and it's why can't we talk about this? And the Mayo Clinic, it just depends on the individual. There are some doctors at the highest levels that are ready to talk with an open heart about these kind of things. There's other ones where it's we're going to touch into that belief system that we were just talking about, and it's well, if I poke around here and say that we need to go through the heart and we need to go through this stuff. That means we're going to have to talk about your relationship with your spouse, with your kids, with your parents, all that's going to come up right there. And so we could just close it up, say, no, that's poppycock. That has nothing to do with anything. We don't need to talk about this stuff. And why? It's because you don't want to look at your own broken heart, and so then we have to have compassion for that person, to be able to say, okay, man, I get it. I'm not just going to hammer you and say whatever, insult you. I'm just going to say, look, man, it looks like you're not really ready to go there. Mm-hmm. And so whatever we can do to help, but don't bring this arrogance. Mm-hmm. Don't try to say, because you studied so much and you know so much, that's why, we can see that it's not. And not to discount knowledge and science, but that's the problem in academia right now. And this is something I ran into, which when I wrote, one of the things was this, I was referring a lot to that book I mentioned, General Theory of Love, And I was talking to somebody, and they said, "Oh, Joe, that book came out like 20 years ago." And I was like, wow, "I'm so surprised it didn't make more like impact." Because for me, it was like so interesting. And they said, "Oh, well, it has that 4-letter word in it." I was like, "Love?" And then I couldn't hold back. I was just like, you know what? The idea that love does not have a place in discussions of medicine and healing is a profound ignorance. Like that's it. Case closed. Like over and done. Like grow up. It's time for the society to grow up. And you can't just say that doesn't mean anything. How people relate to their children, how they relate to themselves, to their spouse, to their community. That these things aren't hugely impactful and actually like lead to incredible healthcare expenditures. Back to what we were talking. If you don't address this stuff, you will just waste, tons of money.
Yep.
This guy, he needed somebody to help him deal with his physical and sexual abuse as a child and all that. And now all of a sudden he's not having surgery anymore. He's not using medication anymore. It's like this idea that your track in life is simply to just get old, retire, get on Medicare so you can handle all your pills that you're going to be taking. And that's a natural progression. It's like very different from life on Earth, from their grandparents and from the previous millennia. People's goals for life. Their own parents, their own grandparents didn't think like that.
Yeah. That's why I'm so excited about where technology is going to take this. I think the newfound Haight-Ashbury, where now every block can be Haight-Ashbury. We are becoming more as disconnected as we are and as connected as we are. There's this oxymoron happening, and I have to have high faith towards it because I truly believe technology. I mean, the internet brought me down to the jungle. It wasn't going out on a whim, taking a risk like Dennis and his brother Terrence. It was literally Googling, finding out, reaching out, and going.
Yeah. No, we have our center. I had a center in Peru. We had a website. Now Ricardo and the Shipibo shamans, now they can share. They're not getting respect in their own country. It's the same thing we were just talking about. My family's from Colombia. It's like, hey man, the indigenous stuff, forget about that. We're prominent people in the world now. We have science and doctors, and don't talk about anyone's an Indian. That's not going to come off very well when we go to America and to Europe and all that. Like, let's downplay that. that. So you got this guy, Ricardo Maringo, who's now, helping people and meeting people from all over the planet Earth and making a big difference in their lives, among many other shamans doing this kind of stuff. Of course, there's problems and there's trouble and there's abusive people and there's, it's a very tricky world and people need to be very, very careful in going down to the Amazon and entering this world. That being said, there are very integrous individuals from the tradition that are really trying to do good work. And now they're getting a chance. They're getting a chance to speak. So it's this irony, like you're saying, I'm going to the World Ayahuasca Conference in May, at the end of May, to present my book in Spanish. Like I got to translate it, we got a publisher. And so I have this whole piece about how I wrote an article for their thing, but how for me it's so important because thanks to the Spanish language, which ultimately like is part of this whole, indigenous devastation Holocaust across Latin America. But thanks to this language, now I get to tell Colombians and Peruvians what was happening at our center because they don't pay attention, They've been ignoring it. It's just like all these crazy gringos, these hippies, they just want to do drugs, and they haven't seen the healing that these people are doing. And so it's like you said, and ultimately I believe that like the internet, for example, of course there's these pitfalls and we have to deal with it and being addicted to Facebook and all that kind of stuff. And we're just learning about it like anything else. And there's no stopping it. It's like, here it comes. It's like, it's made out of the dirt. They just mined it out of the ground, these rocks, these minerals, these metals, and with the human imagination, you turned what was just a pile of rocks, and hopefully you didn't destroy the ecosystem that much, but maybe you did, and you made a computer out of it. just from the human imagination, we turned this rocks and stuff into the computer. And then now this nature, the earth, this computer has this alchemical property, So then you can make these satellites out of the same rocks.
Hey, and plot twist, what do you think sparked the idea to build a computer? Psychedelics, man.
Yeah. Well, then,
Biting the apple,
A lot. Well, there was that guy. I don't know. They made that movie, The Turing Machine. He claimed he was the first computer guy. It was war. It was like espionage. But then, the psychedelics, and a lot of people have revelations from psychedelics, or from their dreams, or from meditation. There's many ways for people to access these other realms.
And let's not get it twisted. Moldy bread had psychedelic effects for some of these alchemists, these witches who were brewing up stuff and healing people.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt that we're kind of reopening our mind to, and the ayahuasca experience and the experience with the mushroom shamans in Mexico and Iboga in Africa, and where these things are still alive, and we're witnessing what looks like wizardry, pulling leeches out of people and blue sparks flying all over the place. And it's just like, it's nature's magic, and it's nature's magic that is allowing you and me to talk to each other right now, when what seems like this parallel universe, right? It's like a straight out of Star Trek. It's flat screen. I'm looking at your face, and it's just made out of the earth and human imagination. Like, that's what it's made out of. So it's like, is that alchemical? I think a lot of people would, somehow it is, to me it is. And so that's the point, is that there's hope in that, it's living, it's breathing, and it's the earth, and we are the walking, talking blood of the earth, made out of the same, just like the computer, and we're doing it too. And so there's something that's been very beautiful about that so far, and hopefully, the beauty is brought back. And part of the beauty, to bring the beauty back, I think what we're learning is, like, we got to deal with this trauma. We got to start remembering that that's part of how we move forward.
And let's not get it twisted. The plants are using us as a tool. We're just a pawn for the plants.
Well, sure. I mean, that's definitely, that's part of the equation, and that's been talked about for a long time. And Michael Pollan, before he started writing about psychedelics, he was writing Botany of Desire, talking about, apples and tulips spreading themselves around the world, because people like them. And so that's part of it. But, we're in relationship with these things. And so what's so bad about that? I love the Amazon rainforest. And if ayahuasca is just, out there to try to tell everybody, hey, don't destroy the Amazon. Remember us. Remember this place. We can help you. It's a relationship. It's about relationship. All these things, the role of relationship in health and healing and medicine, that you're only healthy once you are in right relationship with yourself, with the intimate people in your life, with your society, and with your ecosystem. Unless that's there, you're and not that it's so easy to achieve that, but still, of course, that's where the risk comes into the play. You run risk.
Without having symbiosis with our surroundings, it really tears down our emotional state, and when you travel down to the jungle and you see deforestation, it's gut wrenching, and I have no choice but to bring that story and those happenings back to Middle America with me, where it's like, no, you guys, it's beyond going down there and having psychedelic adventures and coming back with ahas. It's really what's physically going on down there, where we need to protect this. It is up to us.
Well, that's a huge. We can help. You know what I mean? We can help in so many ways. So raising the consciousness and getting people to be more conscious. And there are things going on, like in Maine. As far as I understand, what I read, the forest is growing again. There's actually recovery of the forest. There's expansion of the forest. There's expansion of this wildlife. And so there's the humans are also doing that. And so encouraging that in the exchange, what we learn from them about spiritual and emotional healing and magic. Then we can also try to help them with environmental stuff and, the solar power and all these different things that will hope kind of prevent that. A lot of the destruction that goes on down there is for us. It's for, oil drilling and gold mining. And so, that's one way, people talk about this a lot. They'll say, "Oh, you know, the ayahuasca tourism is destroying the culture, is destroying the Amazon." And you know, I say my family's from Colombia, man. Like, don't tell me you care about the Amazon because I know you don't. Like, this is just Frappuccino talk. You know, you're just saying blah blah blah, and you don't want money, dirty money going to the Amazon. Well, how come you guys are buying cocaine? You know, like you didn't care at all. No, I didn't hear anyone say, "Oh, what about the poor Indians and the poor everything?" And it's like, you don't care. You know, you really care. It's like oil, gold. You know, there's a lot of like obvious destroyers. It's not the ayahuasca tourism. You know, that is not the priority. Like, that's giving some hope, some light, in my opinion. It's hardly like the significant problem if in fact you care, you know, and you want to prioritize where you put your energy.
The tar trade, meanwhile, they're driving their car down a paved road. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, we're all doing it. And, you know, and then they want roads and paving roads down there. And the people want to pave the road to the center where we are. Like, everyone's like waiting for it to get paved. And so it's, you know, it's trying to balance all this out. And yeah, maybe it's out of control. Maybe it's too far. Maybe we've overdrawn, but we're still working towards the legacy. You know, how can we, even if everything collapses, how do you want to live? How do I want to live? You know, and what are we going to leave behind? You know, it's like they built Machu Picchu. You think they should have said, "Oh, well, it's just going to be ruins one day, so why bother?" You know, it's like, well, they wanted to do it and they did it, and it's awesome. You know. So
now, Joe, you were just down at Soltara with many professionals from MAPS, Johns Hopkins.
Yeah.
Could you break down were some of the most influential moments during ceremony or conversation pre and post?
I think, well, for them, that they definitely are very experienced with conversation and talking and all that kind of stuff. So for them, the ceremony seemed very significant. Yeah. You know, we had conversations about ceremony. That was also very significant. We tried to bring the people together to kind of like, we wanted to have this whole bridge work conversation. Like, okay, it was called Bridging Therapy and Ceremony, or Bridging Ceremony Therapy. Like, okay, psychedelic psychotherapy is rolling out. What can psychedelic psychotherapy learn from the psychedelic traditions, from ayahuasca and, you know, from the shamans? So that was a thing. But, you know, inevitably what we thought was going to happen kind of happened, which was like, we couldn't really, in the middle of it was difficult to go into these academic discussions because people were deep in their process.
Yeah.
So we kind of had to shut it down and just say, no, everyone go back to your healing and then we'll talk at the end, you know? And so.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah. But that's the traditional way, see?
Yeah.
Because we say, like Shipibo style, if you want to learn about this medicine, you want to learn about this path, go through the healing, period. The way that you train is the same way you heal. The diet is the same. That's the education. Is like, go through this process deeper and deeper and deeper. Learning through your own personal healing is how you're going to learn how to work this in. So that's what it was. Everyone realized, like, these personal healing elements, those are the elements they're going to bring in to their practice in psychedelic psychotherapy. So, you know, I think that's the reality, is that it sparks a conversation, and we're going to stay in touch, and there'll be more conversations about it. But in the midst of it, you kind of had to go along with the Shipibo style of like, you know what, it's probably better to shut up and just get into the ayahuasca and go deeper inside yourself.
This game is a marathon, not a sprint. So that makes so much sense with it being just a notch in the belt of a long-term game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. No, it was cool. It was very, very cool. And everybody was really excited about it. And I think to me, that's the pathway, is like, okay, we want to teach people. Like, I have a lot of students come down. We were at Niue Rao as a doctor. We had medical students come down, residents come down. We had groups from the naturopathic school here in Phoenix and Tempe, 3 groups or 4 groups, I think, came down. And so I would tell them, we'd have this meeting and they want to take their notes and they want to do all this. I'm like, hey, guys, you're going to put your books and papers away now. Yeah. You know, like, we're going to learn the traditional way. So no books and papers.
I learned to keep my notebook put away after, I think, my second retreat in 2016, where it was like, you know, I'm here and yeah, I might be writing down all this hoopla, but at the same, and all this, these ahas I talk about, But at the same time, how often am I really relaying back to them? It's what was meant to be kept is still with me.
Yeah. I think, it's fine that people journal, and
Yeah.
I think that's great. But it's like you said.
Yeah.
They're like, oh my God, I can't remember everything that happened. And I remember, it's like, I never hear people say that.
Yeah.
I was like, whatever, man. What's going to be with you is going to be with you, There's a lot of things I don't remember that well, this period in life. And it's like, but like that stuff that touches me deeply, that's what I'm getting for. So that, that's the mind thing, the mind part.
Now, Dr. McKenna is the one who made me privy of your book, Fellowship of the River. And he actually talked extensively about it. Did the name for Fellowship of the River, what's that?
That's very nice to hear. I got to ask.
Well, he's the one who linked me up with you. He's like, you need to talk to Joe Tafur. You have to talk to Joe Tafur.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. He's a very nice man for me. Like, I really like talking to him.
Little did I know, he lived 4 blocks away from me in St. Paul.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's awesome
It was just insane, and I got involved with the Psychedelic Society of Minneapolis in St. Paul. That was just like this past summer, like July of 2018. And then I went and I actually met Dennis, and I took a leap, and I kind of told him my background with flying down to the jungle and how it was very like what I was doing with the Meeting of the Minds conference, and how we had our entrepreneurial one that first year, the following month after I met him. But he told me, you got to get to know Dan Cleland. You got to go down to this place called Soltara. I'm going to be holding a retreat. And then I eventually went down there, obviously, kept the relationship strong with Dennis. But it was during that week with him where he strongly suggested getting a hold of you. And then since Dennis and I have had coffee and met up quite a bit and gone to things together, I'll be seeing him again in May in Madison at this event. Yeah. And it's really awesome to have this kind of have Dennis being this glue piece for so much that's helping me.
Yeah. No, that's really, he's been, I have him in the acknowledgments of my book just because he facilitated a lot of things. Knowing him, it helps grease the wheels. And he's all, I don't know him that well. I don't see him much, but whenever I see him, he's real supportive and kind. And so for me, it's a really big deal, because I'm coming into this scene. There's a lot of people that helped me. I did the Soltera retreat with Bia Labache and her partner Clancy, but Bia is a Brazilian anthropologist and academic, and, a big person in the ayahuasca scene who opened the door for me, because I was down there in Peru doing my work as a doctor and Colombian American and all that. And it's like, I wanted to speak at MAPS, about these ideas that I'm talking. I was seeing stuff. I'm like, I got to talk about this, but I'm not university affiliated. I was, like I said, jungle affiliated. I just going all in. And it's people like that, they gave me a chance. They said, no, Joe should speak. Yeah, he's not at the university, but give him a chance. And so Bia, and that's who we just did the retreat with at Soltera. And, Dan and Melissa that run Soltera, I knew them in Peru. They were like, they started because they came to our center,
Oh, okay. It all makes sense now.
Dan used to run trips down to Peru, Dan the man used to run trips down, adventure trips, take people down. Like, I'm going to be the guy to guide you through the jungle. Yep. And then he would show up at our place and we would run them through ceremony, and then he would take them to the next thing, And so I know them from way back then, and their center and the shamans that work for them, where they met them at our place, and they went. And so I've been friends with them for a long time, and it's not everybody that runs a healing center in Peru, so it's kind of a fun person to shoot the breeze with. And so, I had a great time at Soltera with, there's always some little things to talk about of ways to improve, but the people had an excellent experience in our case. They really did have a huge experience. These professionals,
It's a feat just to get people coming from all over the world who are in different varying levels in their growth and existence, to get them all into the room and then be working with professionals, try to hold the space. You're trying to compile and put together so much and keep it intact, just because you talking about kind of breaking through and sometimes it taking a little while. My first year down in 2015, it took me 3 ceremonies to finally break through. They had to get through all my goop.
Right. Exactly. So that's how it is. And so, in Solterra, and, I still take groups down in Niue Rao in Peru, and that's a different kind of, the depth you went and going to the jungle, like you said, and really, Costa Rica is awesome, though. It's a great opportunity, and it's very comfortable there for a lot of people to get. So it's a great opportunity for people to get exposed. Mm-hmm. And then, the Amazon and there with the people, and it's less comfortable, but, it's another depth of the experience. And so that's another great way to do it. And then there's, the movement of trying to get more legal opportunities here in the States, and you got Soul Quest and in that movie From Shock to Awe, and they're in a process with the DEA and the UDV and the Santa Daime, and that's all moving along.
It's very, I'm not sure what to think with the United States. I don't know. I kind of go back and forth with kind of accepting whether or not we're ready. I actually had a talk with Graham Hancock. This is in 2015. Dennis put on a conference at the University of Minnesota that Graham was speaking at, and I got a chance to speak with Graham a couple times that night. And we were talking about bringing ayahuasca to the States, and I just was not really for it, just knowing where we're at. Maybe we should just start with MDMA and psilocybin and then see where that goes.
Well, ayahuasca's here. There's a lot of it going on. And so it's back to this thing, like you were saying, it's just some things are just the cat's out of the bag, Yeah. So we have to be careful. You're right. There's definitely concerns and risk. And so it is more intense, and there's more there's more to be careful with, compared to MDMA and maybe even psilocybin. So, that's that. And that's how do we deal with that? And it's just education, It's like
we have a very reactive society, and what worries me is how connected we are nowadays. It's just one horrible happening in the States can really can ruin the game for all walks of life everywhere who are trying to experience.
Well, people say that, and there has been things that have happened in the States. Mm-hmm. There was a guy that drowned in Mount Shasta in the lake, on ayahuasca, as far as I know. There was somebody that, there's other people that have. So there's been bad things that's happened, not too many, very few. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that counts for a lot, that it's quite rare, and people can understand that. And so, we want people to be, we don't want bad apples to be the big, but hey, there's no stopping it too, so what can we do? It's in Peru, it's legal, Are there a lot of people abusing ayahuasca and using it to hurt people and take advantage of people? Yes. How does that compare to how many people are going to try to seduce people with alcohol tonight in America? Like nothing, it's it's nothing. And so if we can handle that as a society, as a culture, alcohol, where we don't have to incarcerate people because of their dealings with alcohol, I think we can deal with this other stuff. And so, now we're kind of waking up with marijuana. People are getting put in jail for marijuana, like the wake up call around that, how many people suffered over that and they're still suffering, and how kind of crazy that was. And then, because that's really what it is. If we're going to criticize these things and how people are doing this thing, that's fine. Mm-hmm. But I still don't think they should be incarcerated for this. And so I think that's a big point.
And that's the importance of medical doctors like yourself controlling the narrative, the macro narrative where, yes, horrible things happen, but perspective-wise, you've got to realize how many horrible things happen with things like alcohol.
Yeah. Everything else that's out there. So, we want to be careful. We're not trying to promote reckless. And, that's the difference between the first wave and Timothy Leary and that wave that was like, hey, everybody just needs to do this. And then we're saying, no, that's, that happened and all the things that came out of that. But the traditional perspective, when you talk to Native Americans about using peyote, and you talk to Native Americans about using ayahuasca and that kind of stuff. In other words, what does this look like in a family, in a, where you could say, hey, Iquitos, Peru is not exactly under, it's not all, they haven't figured out the utopia. Okay. Yep. There's plenty of ayahuasca everywhere.
Yep.
So everyone's saying, everyone's just going to drop LSD and everything's going to get fixed. I really don't believe that, and ayahuasca is not the answer to everything either. Because look at the situation in the Amazonian region. it's not a utopia, so it takes a lot more than that to do it. And so that's the context, that we need to achieve. That's the maturity, that it's like, okay, this is this, and we need to learn about how to work with it. And it's not about just dosing everybody and dropping people and being reckless with it. That's not necessarily what it's for,
The Aikido's vortex. It was supposed to be a utopia so long ago, but then reality set in. Humans are still humans, man.
Humans are humans. And so that's a whole, the whole thing is like, just, it's our journey in life. We're born, we live, we're going to die. Yeah. So it's really about, ultimately, a spiritual perspective, I think, is very important, because it can help us address like our soul's journey here. Mm-hmm. What are we doing? And, Joseph Campbell said, the world's a mess. Like, it's always been a mess. Your only job is to straighten out your own life. There's satisfaction in that. There's peace in that.
Do you feel that ending up in the jungle, because I know I love Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, do you feel like your trek down to the jungle and diving deep and then eventually facilitating and helping people with only a handful of ceremonies under your belt, do you feel that played a huge role in your own heroic journey?
Well, sure. But, that was huge. That was huge to, man, it just barely helped. Ricardo was in charge. What me helping in ceremony and the reality of what that looks like, just to put that out to people, is like working at Niue Rao, going through intensive training there where I'm not allowed to sing to anybody, for years, like I just have to sit there and go through the humble thing, just like a doctor or a resident, so it was like a very long drawn out process. And just to put that in people's minds that the traditional way of training and learning in this thing is years, and that's hundreds of ceremonies. So that being said, going back to the beginning, yeah, that was a huge moment in my life, because Russ was the one later in the night that he asked me to help him. He's like, Joe, oh man, my neuropathy's acting up. Come on, do something, try to help me. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And I did have an experience, and I'm not trying to encourage people to be like, to go, to just do things naively and say they're a shaman because they had a big experience one time in a ceremony. That's irresponsible. You don't want no one's that excited about the surgeon who just got out of residency. Mm-hmm. When you take your grandma, she's like, whoa, they just started. Oh my God, they're so young. So this thing about, oh my God, I had a big weekend and now I'm a shaman, it's just really silly. Yeah. Silly. So, but I had an experience and I was able to do something for him. And it was just like, whoa, what is this? And then after we went home, Russ is like, why don't you just learn that stuff? And then you can just do it, Joe. Like, you just do it up here. Like, why don't you just learn it? And I was like, that's crazy, but that like stayed with me, those moments, When
you're working with someone's spirit and that wavelength, Hamilton Southern made a great point a couple weeks ago to me regarding, dude, what other profession do you have to put 10, 15, 20 years into just to maybe become a master? The only thing really competing with that is athletes and doctors.
Well, but I mean, there's mastery in every field. You know what I mean? There's mastery in every field. You can say martial arts. You could say any art form, ballet or, music, carpentry, that's what I say. Like this, architecture. That's when I use an example of like this idea of not just being this overnight self-righteous, like, oh, now I'm discovered psychedelics. I'm a shaman. I'm a healer. It's like, there's so much wisdom gained over the lifespan. And when you have multiple lifespans, there's things that we work with and live with every day that they didn't learn it in one lifetime. Mm-hmm. Architecture is like the most obvious example I bring up all the time because I'm usually in some big building in some room. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, look around, guys. They didn't figure this out in one life. Yeah. This is wisdom. This is cultural wisdom. And so draw on it because anybody doing anything, they become a master, in 20, 30 years. They learn things about it that the other person that doesn't do that doesn't know, So I think there's a lot of room. It's just experience teaches wisdom and letting people show like if you put your time and energy, that 10,000 hours, you can do things that, I mean, obviously some people are very talented, but when they put all the extra time into it, all of a sudden it's like, whoa,
That's why I like working with specific shamans who have their own, they put in so much time that they have their own little twists and the ways they work. I think of Maestro Alberto down at Blue Morpho. He's such a wizard that like it brings out this comical side to him where it makes you even more. It's one thing to be comfortable with a spiritual practitioner or even a doctor, but when there's comedy involved as well, it makes you even more comfortable, it seems, at least me personally. Yeah. And it makes me get more out of it.
Yeah, sure. That's really important, the open-hearted, the humor, it's cosmic. Humor and laughter is cosmic, and it brings people into the moment.
Space Earth, baby.
Space Earth. What is it called? Spaceship Earth.
Spaceship Earth. Joe, I think this solidifies it. We're going to see you in November.
Oh, are we?
We'll talk offline more about it. We'll get it dialed in. Where can people find you? Tell them.
I have first big thing is modernspirit.org. Modernspirit.org is their nonprofit, and we're raising money for the Epigenetics Project with MAPS and USC. So we need support, and so we're looking for support. Then I got my website, drjoetafur.com, talks about a little bit of what I'm doing, and there's some stuff on there about the book. There's photos from the book on that website that no one would check because I didn't put them in the book. I put them on the website if anybody wants to see. And then we have the book, Fellowship of the River, is available on Amazon.com. It's in paperback, it's on Kindle, and it's an audiobook. And so it's all there through it's through Amazon, through ACX, Amazon, Audible. So yeah, it's me reading it, and it was a fun process.
You and your dreamy voice.
Well, you're so kind. You're so kind. Oh, thank you, Nick. I'm really glad that I got a chance to talk to you and get to know you and see what you're doing. And I'm very impressed, how you're handling it. Because when I first talked to you, I'm like, oh, this guy, he's kind of, he's I don't know. He seems like he's like I don't know who he is. But he's coming off like I should know who he is. But I see it, and it's awesome. Thank you for what you're doing.
I'm a wild card, but the thing is I need smart people like you in my life.
You're a smart man, you know what I mean? All of us are smart monkeys.
bunch of brilliant monkeys.
Huh?
Bunch of brilliant space monkeys.
That's what it is, part of it. We're all part of it. And the most advanced knowledge is through the heart. I think that's a fact. And so that it levels the playing field right there.
I appreciate it, Joe. We will talk soon, brother.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.